Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show based out of here in San Antonio, Texas, out of Bexar Stage, where I get to interview folks not just in the San Antonio area, but across Texas and across the country, and pick their brains about what it's like to be an improviser and just really get their thoughts. Today's show is specifically part of our diversity week, and today's show is about being Latino or Latina, Latinx in an improv community and what that means to you. So let me introduce my fantastic panel. Number one is going to be Tina Jackson. Would you please join us?
Hey, how's everybody doing?
My middle square, Tina, thank you for being on this show. Thanks for being my right hand. Tina, again, 20 years of experience in improv. You are the owner and operator of Bexar Stage here in San Antonio.
Yes.
But to be clear, you are not a member of the Latina community here in San Antonio.
I'm too Irish.
Too Irish, okay.
They won't let me in. I'm too Irish.
I do want to underscore something though. As the owner of improv theater, you do have a special ability, maybe even power, to be able to lift up those improvisers that are in underrepresented communities. Is that true?
Yes, I mean that's part of my job for sure.
Fantastic.
Especially in San Antonio, we've got such a huge Mexican, Latin community that showcasing non-white voices is a huge part of my job as an artistic director.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing that perspective to the show. Let me go. I'll get right back to you.
Yep.
Let me introduce my next panelist, Cristy Salinas Lynch. Please join us.
Hey,
Cristy. Thank you for being on the show. Can you give us a little bit of background as far as how long you've been doing improv and where you do improv or where you have been doing improv?
sure. So I'm based in Austin. I've been doing improv for about 6 years, and I started at the Hideout Theater, which is a very narrative-based improv, which is perfect for me because I'm a writer. Cool. And I've also studied at Coletown. That was mostly sketch, and the Institution, and I've performed in theaters now. Like I can say like, oh, I performed in Alaska and in Chicago and stuff, and I performed at Bexar Stage. So happy to be here. Thank you.
And you are a member of Escándalo, so any of the Bear Watchers would be able to remember you from those shows.
Yeah, so I'm not in Escándalo anymore, but I did go twice when we were first performing to San Antonio, and my hair was a lot longer. People won't recognize me, but it was coming back.
That's right.
For the fan.
Cristy, thanks for that background. I appreciate it. My next panelist is Claudio Fox. Claudio Fox, please join us.
Howdy.
Hey, Claudio. Same question to you. How long have you been doing improv, and where are you based out of?
I started in Austin and still am in Austin. Started improv about 9 years ago, started at the Hideout, and then Institution, and then I took classes at Coletown and Merlin Works. And some
been all over the place.
I haven't done anything at Fallout, and I mean to as soon as this stuff is over.
Well, yeah.
Good deal. Claudio, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, also directed
yes.
Spanish Maestro and was in a troupe called Corazón de Tragedia.
Yeah, that's one of our favorites.
I've seen it. Very good. Keep on going. Anything else?
Performed in Hawaii with Shades of Brown, which is like a Spanglish troupe. He played Bexar Stage too.
Cool.
Sweet. Awesome. Claudio, thank you so much. My next panelist is Alex Flores. Alex, would you please join us?
Where she is?
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Glad we caught you, Alex.
No, I just happened to be here ready.
Perfect. Alex, how long have you been doing improv, and where are you based out of?
So I'm here in San Antonio, Texas. I've been doing improv roughly 4 years, but I started actually in Austin at Coletown. So yeah.
Awesome.
And now she's in Key Party with me.
Yes, I do
fantastic.
Key Party. I'm also in a new group called Mentirosas, and that's it right now. Yeah.
Have you ever performed in Hawaii or Alaska?
No, I cannot say that I have.
Okay, well, not yet.
I have not been to either of those places either, so it's like.
Okay, all right. Well,
All right. Well,
That's
we got
okay.
room to grow.
Yeah.
all right, folks. As
I
you
have
guys know,
performed. I've done somewhat of performance on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean coast. So does that?
Is
Can
that
I,
like
can
a?
I flex with that?
wait, was it?
Count it. I'm just gonna count it.
Yeah, I won a free bottle of vodka for being crazy, but it wasn't that crazy. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. You might
The
also
people of the cruise
recognize.
like me.
You might also
we-
recognize our Alex Flores as the Spurs Tia,
Oh, that is my
which
my
is
accolade.
literally
That is my
San
accolade.
Antonio claim to fame. So
That got me thinking about International Waters. And wouldn't International Waters be an awesome name for a group?
actually, yes. Let's
Yeah.
start it.
All right.
I'll
So,
be the Irish one.
It sounds like a smooth jazz band.
It does.
all right. So you guys know the whole purpose that I invited you guys on here today is to talk about being Latino or Latina in an improv community. Now, Alex, I want to start with you. I'm going to throw out just a really generic question at you. So, just generically, what does it mean to you to be a Latina performing improv, doing stage work?
Yeah. So thinking about it, I think in general, I've been doing theater things since high school, and I guess I didn't put much thought into it until I went to college, where I was performing in like very white spaces. I went to college in Ohio.
In Ohio,
And
yeah.
I was probably the only brown person in the theater department. And it made me really reflect on like being that representation and how I wanted to go about it. And coming into the improv scene, there's double whammy, right? Like being a woman and being like a woman of color in the improv scene is a very important thing. And I think, especially in the San Antonio community, one, we're introducing improv to a lot of people for the first time because
Yeah,
improv
it's
is not,
community.
it's a young form in San Antonio. So being a part of introducing it to the community is very important to me. And two, showing people while introducing them, showing them, hey, you could do it too. I'm just like a teacher by day. Putting on a show for a community that looks like me is important to me. But I also can't say that I'm interested to hear other panelists' contributions because we perform to an audience that looks like us, right?
Yeah.
That kind of, that's reflective of me. So I'm curious as to what other people's experiences are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So what you're referring to is the fact that San Antonio is a very, I think we can say majority Hispanic, Latin American community. So like you said, the people that we're performing to very often look like we do. But Cristy, you perform in Austin, which I've lived in before, and it's a different demographic. And you also performed in San Antonio, by the way. So how would you compare those two cities when it comes to performing?
Well, I want to actually ask a follow-up to you all. San Antonio being predominantly Hispanic, do you find that your audiences reflect that as well? Or are you still drawing out the five?
So I was gonna actually add a follow-up statement to that. It's interesting because I said so over and over that it's a new form. I think, no, I mean, it's not completely, totally reflective. I mean, obviously we're going to have a lot of brown people in the audience because of just the nature of the city. But I think we could even pull more if there was more exposure, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think it's so fresh and so new that it's not really, I think people will go to like LOL and stuff. But improv is a whole nother ball game. So
Yeah, that's something they're way less familiar with. Yeah, I think while we do pull, I think, a decently diverse audience, not a completely diverse audience, and that's something that was actually supposed to be one of our year 3 goals, which was oh man, so many things thrown off. But was to work on creating a more diverse audience, a little bit more representative of San Antonio. So I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that there is a decent enough mix of cultures in our audience that, when you make a joke or a punchline or a scene that involves more of your heritage, that I do think the audience does respond to it. They understand it, even if they're not Latinx, that they understand the culture because San Antonio's culture is so represented within.
Yeah, like I would never feel uncomfortable making like saying something in Spanglish or making a cultural joke.
Yeah, I know several times.
Because I would feel comfortable that people would get it. And plus, Tina, you know, the audience is usually my family.
I was gonna say, and
my family.
Alex always brings her whole family. All right, so Cristy, back to the original question. I didn't want to derail that too hard about the diversity of audience, because I don't think we're fully representing San Antonio yet. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've been in shows that are like, for example, Escándalo was all Latinx.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bilingual show, and we had a Spanish show, so obviously it drew more like Latinos and Latinx audience. A lot of family members would go, but I would say most of the time it's a mostly white audience. I'm in another troupe called Minority Report, and we're all diverse, but we're not all Hispanic. And we just come to the point with, well, first of all, can I cuss? I cuss naturally.
You absolutely can.
Okay.
Fuck yeah.
We come to the point where like, fuck it. If they don't get a reference and we think it's funny, we think it's funny, you know?
Yeah.
So we've just gone with that attitude, and I feel like I think it works, because I think it's just like, yes, there's like the whole, like, you want to make people laugh, right? It really sucks to perform and have nobody get your references. But at the same time, we're not worried about that as much, because we're just like, you know what, we're gonna do these jokes and sort of just introduce you to these things. And that, like, even when I've done shows that are like when we're speaking in Spanish and stuff, because everybody's Spanish level is different, like we're still doing pretty like basic stuff, where if you went to our one Escándalo show that was all in Spanish, you could still understand most of the show too. So I think it's a lot of like introducing people to the idea of it and getting comfortable with it, because I think the other misconception is like, oh, if it's a show about like Latinx culture, then the audience, it should only be like a Latinx audience, like people just not for them. And I think I think if you show people can still be fun and you can still understand it, like they'll be more comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then it's still also like when you were saying the fuck it with Minority Report, like sort of cultural reference stuff. I think that still leads to the best authentic improv that you're going to do is not editing yourself for your audience, but instead introducing them to your world. I think keeps your performances still really authentic.
So Claudio, what do you think? Also being based out of Austin, do you feel that your performances are different? Do you make different choices based on your white audience or a San Antonio browner audience?
Well, there's two things. One is I'm in a troupe that does all Spanish, and then there's Spanish Maestro, and they're both kind of different. And the last time we played in Bexar Stage, we had a show Thursday night at Anything Live, at this theater. Anyway, it started off with a stand-up from El Salvador, and I was like, fuck yes, because all we do is Spanish, and it was like, at least one person is going to understand what the fuck we're talking about. Right after he gets off stage, he gets the fuck out of there. So it's like,
of course,
the one person who could have understood all our jokes. However, instead of that, they'll laugh like if we say like an Excel spreadsheet or something in English that we couldn't think of in Spanish, then people will laugh at that because like, oh, I understood something. Now, contrast that with the Bexar Stage audience where at least half are going to know when to laugh or know what the fuck is going on or understand the references. So that was fucking awesome. The next night, like, okay, like, it felt more welcoming. Now, Spanish Maestro it's also all Spanish. However, I will say with regard to what you said about the Latinx spectrum, the very first show we had 12 people, and we had at least 6 different native speakers asking each other what this word meant because they were coming from very different Spanish backgrounds. So
wow, I love that. Yeah.
America, Spain, Puerto Rico, and then me from the border. And everybody had different levels of proficiency. Well, not necessarily proficiency, but just different words for different stuff.
Sure.
Reminded me of going to visit my cousins in Mexico, and then they have different words for stuff.
Yeah.
Go on. The other thing, before we started Spanish Maestro, about 2 or 3 years before that, they had a Spanish Maestro jam just to see what it would be like. And I had never done improv in Spanish, really. like as characters and stuff like that. And they just got up there and said, okay, we're going to do Maestro, but it's going to be in Spanish. And one of the first scenes, I just went back to my experience and where I'm coming from. And I'm speaking in this character based on loosely on the mechanics that worked at the motorcycle shop I was at. And as I'm speaking this, I'm like, holy shit, that's sexist, or that, like, you can't say that. And it was just weird how what was normal in my Spanish part of the brain was like really taboo in the English.
Yeah.
Wow, I never considered that.
Like trying to censor or like add a qualifier or something, but you can't just say that like that. So that was interesting.
That is really interesting. Is that something that you've honed then since you're, you know, like you were saying this was a couple of years ago, like where you edit yourself better when you're switching languages in your brain, or what?
Yeah, I think I became more aware of it. I think what I do now is I think in English and then speak in Spanish. And then sometimes I forget, because I think at the last show, it was supposed to be an all Spanish show. And I started speaking English. And it wasn't until Ignacio said something in Spanish, like, oh shit, yeah, this is a.
Oh, I hadn't considered that. I have never improvised in another language. I've improvised in other countries before, but I've always spoken like I'm not fluent in any other language. But I love Corazon, Escándalo. I love the Spanish language. I can understand enough that I can sit in the audience and really enjoy it. Or one of our stand-ups is Juan Torres, who's from Puerto Rico, and he has started doing his set in Spanish now. And so but he also has a completely different Spanish set that has not translated at all into English. And he's just like, no, that one has to be in Spanish because of the way that I say things. And I thought that was so interesting because I've never improvised in another language, that I've never done the translation in my brain to think about, like you said, your Spanish brain and your English brain. So I think that concept is really interesting to me and something that I'm very curious about.
Yeah, I think oh, go ahead.
Go on.
Well, what happened is I became more aware, more, I guess, present in the moment not, because I'm not really filtering, because I'm still being inspired by the last thing said. But I think I just start off at a less a more conventional place versus something like way out there.
So, Claudio, you mentioned a couple of things about how we might all be coming from a different background, whether it's we grew up in Mexico or we are first generation, second generation, or different countries even. I'd love to hear from each of you whether or not you feel that you have a responsibility to represent your own Latin culture, whether your Latin culture is border culture like you, Claudio, or possibly from Mexico, your generational culture. Do you feel a responsibility to represent that on the stage?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't, and I struggle with like this thought of like, I don't want to be a caricature. Like, I don't want to, I don't know. Like, the answer is, I don't know for me. I don't want to necessarily stereotype myself or in any way, like, offend anyone who may feel I'm making fun of them. Yeah. So I think I struggle with that thought because I don't know where I lie quite yet. Because I don't think I've ever had an opportunity to play like, or where I thought to do that, if that makes sense. I don't know. That's just where I'm at.
Cristy?
So yes and no, right? I feel like representation matters. There's also, I think it comes with any like person of color of any type of race or ethnicity. It also becomes like how Latino you are, like how much of that, especially because I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. I'm like 5th or 6th generation Texan, but my family grew up right on the border and we grew up speaking Spanish. And so I don't have any cousins in Mexico, but I grew up like with Spanglish was my first language, Spanish, English. And my brain will still think a lot like that. And it's like the whole filtering out and improv. So when I can have a character, that to me is like the valley. Like for example, my abuela, if I want to imitate her, there are so many jokes that I would love to say that I know that hit in Austin, but they would hit in San Antonio. Like I would love to do more of that because she just, for example, one of the things that happened in high school that she told us, that's this super Spanglish. She's like, "Otro Cristina si no es pori," and she was talking about my friends coming over. Pori means pori.
Yeah.
And you see, like it's funny if you like get the Spanglish part,
Mhm.
if you don't know Spanish, but like. It's like, oh, I would love to do stuff like that more, and I don't. But I have found myself, like, I have caught myself doing stereotypical things that later I'm just like cringing.
Mm.
And then also one of the things that I would like to direct more, that's something I haven't been performing as much because I would like to direct more. And one of the projects I've been testing out with some Latinas is this show called Brujajas, which is also a pun, if you know enough. And it's like a coven meeting once a month to discuss like bruja business. And it's like a bunch of stuff that you can bring from your culture. And we did it on Zoom and we did it in person. We did it, the first time we did it, there was like no Latinos in the audience. And we had holy water and like rosaries and all this stuff. And people still really liked it. They were confused, I'm sure. I think it would, if we did the exact same show in San Antonio, people would get that more. Like if you're gonna try to cure somebody with an egg, like you're like, okay,
Yes.
But people in Austin are like, what the fuck?
What is with this egg? Yeah.
I'm like, I still don't know, but we had it. We had it all the time. So I think a lot of it is more like having shows that just to prove like it can be funny for Latinos or Latinx, but also for everybody. And I think that just like opening people's eyes to what you can do, because just a few years ago, I mean, I don't know if you were in it, Claudio, at this point, but Shades of Brown, it had to have been in 2014. That was the first time I saw a show where people were not all white. And that was when I realized like, oh my God, this is the first non-white troupe I've seen. And they did like, and there was in Spanglish and stuff too, and it was really funny and like the audience liked it. So now we have more troops and, you know, more shows. And I just wish that like, it becomes a normal instead of like, this is our token Latinx show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
No, why can't it be in the mix?
Well, I was going to say women have been doing this for a while now, is like creating all female teams, or, you know, like really forwarding like women in improv or solidarity and these things. So like having these brown and black and LGBT and, you know, like having these diversity centric teams, or like that we all have this one thing in common, I think can be a really fun place of exploration and solidarity with each other. But then obviously we want to make sure that there's diversity in the rest of improv as well, which is, I would say, fairly predominantly white.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's something to be said for, you know, representing that within, you know, more traditional white improv, and then also to have, you know, the differences with your sort of more, I guess I don't know what to call them, like the groups, the solidarity groups, I'm just going to call them that, where it's just like, hey, we all have this in common and we're all working toward this one cultural goal, perhaps. But I was struck by a question while you guys were talking about some of your stuff about making, Cristy especially, about making your shows accessible to your, you know, predominantly white audiences in Austin, is like when you're marketing a Latinx show, like there's like kind of a marketing aspect to like, which I, you know, like, not that I haven't considered, because I've considered it when Escándalo would come to San Antonio, is like, oh, I need to make sure we market this differently because San Antonio will really respond to it. I want to make sure that we're getting our, you know, the right audience for this show. But the marketability of a, you know, instead of just like doing whatever you want and like the fuck it attitude versus the, I hope our audience understands this sort of mentality. I think, does that strike you when you go on stage of like, we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know how the audience is going to feel? Like, Claudio, do you feel that with Spanish Maestro?
Sort of. Well, the thing, the reason I had the troops and the Spanish Maestro different is that when we do the troupe, it's going to probably be a predominantly white audience, whereas with Spanish Maestro, they know the whole thing is going to be in Spanish. And that's been weird because sometimes we have like 5, 6 people in the audience. It's happened a few times. Other times it'll sell out, and it's just been weird marketing the show because there's definitely an audience out there. But I think improv is something that's relatively new to Hispanic culture versus, I guess, white culture. I think there's like systematic inequalities or barriers to being exposed to it or finding out about it. Because I know stand-up has been around for a long time, like with Polo Polo and things like that. But recently, like I think there's a resurgence, and I would call it like a more woke stand-up, whereas before it was just like insult comic stuff. I think improv is also something that lends itself to that.
No, for sure. And so like piggybacking on what you're saying, having a more woke audience or more woke performers. I think that in the same way that American culture at large is undergoing a transition where we're becoming more woke and more aware of our own inner biases, I think that the Latin communities across the world are also engaging in that same revolution. And as they're moving forward, I think we're moving forward as well. And it's something that we're considering as well. So those of us that are coming at this from dual cultures, we're hitting that mark in 2 different ways. Claudio, just like you said earlier, when you said something in Spanish, you're like, oh my God, I would never have said that in English. Right? That wouldn't be appropriate then. So I feel like maybe those of us who are Latin performers are engaging in multiple little revolutions in our brain at this time.
Yeah, when we're getting ready for Spanish Maestro, in English Maestro, there's a game called More British, and the director stops it and says, please be more British, or can you do that more British? And basically the game is, it starts off in like an American English and then just goes into this incomprehensible British with British references in there.
I've never played that game, but it sounds hysterical.
It really is. And I wanted to do that in Spanish. However, in Spanish, I was thinking, the first thing I went to in British versus American English was like the difference between Mexican Spanish and Cuban Spanish. So I was going to say más cubano because it's louder, it's faster, they don't pronounce some of the letters. And my first thought was like, that would be hilarious. But then like I took a step back and was like, no, you're making them the butt of the joke. And this, in more British, you're punching up. And this would be like a lateral, or it was quite.
Yeah.
We ended up going with Más Luchador, which is fine to pick on them because that one, it's something you could elevate and what's it called?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about the characters that we play on stage. My very first level 1 class. And I think this is probably true for everybody's first level 1 class, where we're talking about the different characters that we can play on stage and how some different, Claudia, it's about punching up, right? It's about, I think the way that my teacher explained it is that you typically want to play a character that's a lighter skin than you or the same color of skin as you, in order to avoid creating a caricature of a different race or a different culture. What I want to talk to you guys about is, do you feel pressure to play Latin characters on stage? Do you choose not to because you want to go the exact opposite direction? Just in general, I would love to hear how your Latin culture and your Latin identity influences the characters that you play. Alex?
Great question.
Oh, Jesus. You know, when you were asking that, I was just thinking about my theater experience more so. I went to high school right in San Antonio, obviously a brown community. However, my theater teacher, I'll never forget this and it sticks with me. I asked him one time why I didn't get a role. And it was like, the role I was going for was like a grandmother figure or something like that. It was the comedic role of this dark.
The character role, yeah.
Yeah. And he straight up told me, he's like, well, you wouldn't have matched everyone else. And the rest of the people in that family were white. And I'll never forget that. Stuck with me.
That makes me
for a very long time because I thought, well, shit, is that going to be the problem? Is that going to be why I don't get roles in the future?
Yeah, is it going to prevent me from roles in the future?
Yeah. And then what's funny is in college, I had a professor tell me, she's like, no, you need to be doing more. And then she had obviously no reference to like what happened in high school. She's like, you need to be doing more. So, and
Well,
then,
wait,
and
more
then
what? Doing more what?
like more theater. And because I was pretty reserved in like my theater community. Cause again, like I said, I was the only person of color in this whole like theater program that I interacted with. She's like, we need to see more of you. And then I thought about it and I was like, well, did she mean that in a bad way? Like, I don't know if she meant that in like I don't know I didn't know how to take it at that time. But reflecting on my improv community, like experience, I think there's a line, and I think everyone said like yes and no. Like Cristy and Claudio have like agreed that I want to obviously represent who I am and my culture, but I also just don't want to make it a mockery. And again, I have less experience, so I can't say that I've been in a situation where I felt that I felt that I needed to do that, or I guess, I don't know, maybe that's telling of me, but I just haven't experienced that situation yet.
Wait, a situation where you felt you didn't have to choose a Latin
No,
character?
I haven't experienced like in a scene, I haven't experienced the thought like, oh, well, let's play this like an abuelita, or like, let's play like, it just hasn't been a thought. And maybe it's something I need to start thinking about more.
Wait, hold on. You've never thought about playing an abuelita, an abuelo, a tío, or a tía?
It just has like, it hasn't like, I like because again, I struggle with this, like, I don't want to be a caricature. Like, I just don't want to, and maybe that's me playing safe. And it's something I probably should evaluate, but I don't want to, and especially where we have a Latino audience, I don't want to do an injustice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting.
Well,
Can I jump in?
yeah,
I was going to say, I didn't feel comfortable doing that either. And I don't even think I do it that often. So in my mind, if I'm going on stage, I'm a Latina character. I'm a cop, I'm a lawyer, I'm whatever, I'm a Latina. But I don't have to necessarily say anything in Spanish, sound different.
That's,
Yeah.
There are times where like, if I'm going to play like a mom who's Latina, I might be like, hi, mija. And that's like the extent of it. And I'm just like, the difference is I say mija every once in a while. But like, actually go and try to play like a Latina character full on out. I had, if you could ask the directors of that show, like they really had to push me to like be a villain, be more of everything, because we're taught to just fit in and hold it back.
mm-hmm.
Like when I first moved to Austin back in 2005, my accent was thicker. Like if you've heard anybody from the Valley, I sounded like that. I would get made fun of for the way I spoke all the time. I've literally had people tell me I sounded stupid. And so like it made me like, I wanted to assimilate and be more articulate as I mess up the word. And then it took a while to like sort of undo that and like, okay, this can be on stage and be funny, but until like, well, we were doing a scandal and we came across so many other challenges too that just had not come up yet. And I think it's just like, had I not experienced all that, I don't think I would feel as comfortable now trying to play a character like that.
Yeah, and I love what you said, that like on stage I'm already like, I'm me, like I can't take this off. So like you're gonna get a Latino version of whatever regardless, or Latino whether I'm playing a man or a woman regardless, right? So yeah, that's an interesting point.
It's like, why do people assume if you're just normal that you're a white person? That's
I think
why is that the standard or the normal? Yeah.
And I think that's
we had a similar conversation on Monday when we were talking about LGBT improv. Is why is straight the normal? Like what, so. Okay.
Claudio, have you ever played an abuela, abuelita, tío, tía?
Well, the first day that Corazón de Tragedia had show, we had one at Anything Live, and then we went to go do the Free Fringe at the Hideout. The Anything Live show it was rough. There was 8 of us. After that, like 4 people were like, no, we're good. We're not going to do the other show. So just 4 of us went to do the other show. And one thing I had set up in the format was like, let's just do a montage because less shit to keep track of versus a narrative where it's this whole thing. And holy shit, we did a narrative, and it was one of the most amazing shows I've ever done. I played a chauvinistic old man, or a grandfather. And the other character I played was just like a real shady, handsome guy. And Marcia was the protagonist, and she was the granddaughter of oh no. Well, anyway, let me get back to, so I was playing caricatures. However, the way I saw it was caricatures of some of the problems within Hispanic culture. However, within the scene and within that show, the protagonist was like, I would amplify some of the chauvinistic stuff like way up there to where it was obviously absurd that any would think that women are inferior when this woman is clearly has all this power and knows what the fuck is going on, and this guy's just stupid and archaic. Yeah, it was more again. So it was a caricature, but I don't think it was in the sense where it was based in Hispanic culture, not necessarily like,
because I think that would play in, you know, Anglo culture too, is to hit a really chauvinist character super hard, like is something that I've done in a show where I'm very clearly a woman who tries to empower other women, but I've played chauvinist on stage for the sole purpose of being shit upon by my players. So I think there's that level that you hit with caricature where you're like, I am clearly absurd.
Yeah. And it was great because it was like serving up like a volleyball and them just like spiking it in, and it was like everything just went like serve, set, and it was so much fun, like in that kind of where everything is just hitting and everybody was just in the zone. At the end of the show, David Ron was playing the love interest for the creepy guy I was doing, and at the very end, he's there. The character was there waiting for me to go pick her up, and then I'm thinking like, oh shit, like if I go, I'm gonna have to kiss him, and that's like real me thinking like boundaries and shit like that or whatever. And within that hesitation as to whether or not to go in and kiss him, what's it called? They cut the lights, and it was just such a perfect ending where it kind of ended on a cliffhanger, but you kind of knew like the dude's never coming. But it was just so much like, well, one, I was a little relieved because I wasn't ready to kiss David, but yeah, it was just a great button to end on.
So you feel you were able to actually communicate different parts of Latin culture during that narrative show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because there is a lot of inherent sexism within the culture. And I think that's something that needs to be brought up because there's this like old generation versus new generation as to what, and then I think women have so much put on them versus men in Latin culture. And I see it still at work with Hispanic students where the mothers will be considerably more strict with their daughters than with their sons. And it's like this double standard, and it's still going on. So I think it could be possibly seen as a caricature, but I think it's more social commentary.
That's great.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, improv as social commentary. One thing a few things that I'm noticing here is that, Claudio, you didn't have any fear of putting some of the ugly parts of Latin culture up on stage. But Cristy and Alex, you guys, what I'm hearing from you is that there was a certain amount of risk that you know that you take when you put a Latin character up on stage, and you're so afraid, you're so concerned about maybe causing harm by doing it wrong. Am I close? Am I?
I feel like in the shows that I do it's more recent, I start to feel like more worried about the white audience about sometimes we'll say stuff and at the end we'll be like, we're all married to white dudes, we're okay. We like you all. Sorry. No, but
don't worry about us.
I know, right? You all got it together. No, but so sometimes I worry more about that. I don't worry as much like now about how it's representing Latinx culture, or because there still aren't too many improvisers that I know of, or like Hispanic women that go through the program and stay in troops and stuff. So I feel like it's just more important to show like, this is what I'm doing. I'm comfortable doing it. You can do this too. You don't have to. It's all like what you want to make it. But yeah, so that's all a long story about that. But I wanted to also bring up like naming, because that's come up in conversation too. And that's the thing. If you're in a troupe or team or in a show, I would encourage everyone to have a conversation on what kind of name you'd like to have, because that can cause some issues if you just make assumptions. And then there was just a show we were doing, and there was me and another Hispanic woman in it, and we loved the show, loved everybody, get along. It was very diverse. But we kept getting like super white names, and I'm like, if you name me Diane one more time, there. I've never met a Diane. Who is this? Is that your mother? Are you naming me after your mom? Just, I'll give you some ideas for names that can be like, they can be said in English and Spanish. Like my name is Cristina, but it's spelled in Spanish, but you can say it either way. Oh, are you also,
I'm Cristina without an H, yeah.
Ah, interesting.
That's something that comes up so often across just the diversity spectrum, where I think every improviser has had that situation where, wait, why do you keep calling me by a Latin name? Why can't I be a white name? Or why do you keep calling me a white name? Throw some other names out there. Or why do you keep calling me by a feminine name when I'm trying to be a man, or vice versa? It's a really complex issue I'm beginning to realize in improv community.
Yeah, it would also depend on who's doing the naming, because like if like a white man called me like Lupita, I'm gonna be like, we're ending the scene right now because I'm gonna cut you, because I don't trust you.
Kill him.
But if it's like Angelica, like on stage with me, and she calls me something, well, I don't care, because I trust her and she's
I think you would understand from that peer level of like, it's done with respect versus it might be, like, are they just like naming my color?
Yeah. So there's a fine line. That's a really interesting conversation.
That's really a whole nother, maybe we'll do another episode on that.
Well, we do, with some of my troops, we've done a lot of like name games, or like in Escándalo, we had the same name. There were so many things to keep track of. We always had the same name. And so we're like, that solves it. And then you're just a different character. But just something to have a conversation.
Oh, that's cool.
Because like, you're right. If somebody called me Maria, and like it was a white person I had never met before, and just call me that on stage, I'd be like, okay, let me see what else you're going to endow me with before I get it. But I might just flip a shit. I don't know.
It's fascinating. We were before the show, we were talking about how the Latin community is not a monolithic culture. It's not a monolithic community. We're coming at this from different backgrounds, different generational periods. We're coming at this from different racial backgrounds, different countries. And we don't always all have this exact same opinion. And I love that. That's how it's supposed to be. Cristy, you said something that I really want to underscore, and that's have the conversation about the names. Have the conversations about the names with your performers. Just like it's really important to have conversations about boundaries with the people that you perform with, people in your community. Include names in there, include everything. And this is gonna be a little bit weird, but for all of the improvisers out there that are white, that are not minorities, I encourage you to have these conversations with the minorities in your community, because these are fantastic, fantastic conversations to have. And if you have these conversations, you are less likely to have Alex try to cut you in the middle of the scene, which nobody wants.
She will, and I'll let her. Right on,
folks. I should let you up. Folks, that is the end of this show. Oh my God, I could take the show going for another hour and a half. You guys
honestly,
are so
we went over, but like I'm having a great time. So
yeah, it's good.
I just want to say, the Tina in Spanish
is a bathtub.
No, it's Latina.
Latina.
The Tina, awesome. Folks, again, I want to thank Cristy. Thank you for being on the show. Claudio, thank you for joining us. Alex, thank you for being here. Tina, my right hand, thank you for being on the show. Thank you so much for bringing your perspective as the owner of a theater, as somebody who can actually help to push up those performers that don't often get opportunities, like the story that we heard from Alex. Thank you, Tina, for being somebody that can really promote us and help us get up there on stage.
I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
I'm Irish, and I'm not perfect, but I'm trying.
For all of the Twitch users who are watching this live, thank you so much for being on here. One thing I want to underscore, Dirty Hard Money said something that I thought was fantastic. He mentioned that representing our culture isn't necessarily a responsibility, but maybe it's an opportunity. I just kind of think that's a nice contrast to think
That's
about.
a nice underline.
Yeah. Yesterday, again, we're talking about Diversity Week. Monday was about the LGBTQ community that is performing on stage in improv theaters. Today was the Latinx, and Friday is going to be the African American community. Tina, you're going to post some really wonderful charities.
Yeah, I'll post them in the links.
Fantastic, and that'll be if you want to contribute to any of the underrepresented communities that you saw Monday, today, or that you will see on Friday. Please visit those links and contribute whatever you think is helpful. And regarding improv right now, Claudio mentioned it a couple times. Doing improv right now is a little bit hard. There are a lot of ways, though, that you can help improv theaters because things are kind of crazy out there. If you're new to improv, go online and do some research and find an improv theater in your area. Go to their website and see if you can contribute somehow. If you're in Austin, I want to hear about these Austin theaters. I heard Coletown. I heard
Hideout Theater.
Hideout. Great.
Fallout.
What else?
Hideout, Fallout, Merlin Works, and Institution.
Fantastic. If you're in the Austin area or if you've been to those theaters, find those theaters online and maybe you can contribute something to them. If you're in the San Antonio area, if you've ever been to Bear Stage, if you like what you saw today, go to bearstage.com and there's a donate button right there on the main page. Folks, thank you all again for joining. It was a fantastic conversation and I hope to have a further discussion with you guys later. Guys, thank you all so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Quit it.